Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in a Philosophy of Religion by Edgar Sheffield Brightman. We're going to take a look at our composite picture for the entire Phenomenology of Value. We've already examined a recap of a Phenomenology of Religion. Now we look at its second layer of phenomenology, the Phenomenology of Value. That's going to run from pages 93 to 172. And we will have the same layout here with our chart. The left is subjective, the right is objective, the bottom is observation, the top is notion of the true. Let's start with block 1. We'll take a look at our phenomenological starting point. We begin with Christianity as living religion because we concluded the previous phenomenology with living religion. Now we begin with living religion. Living religion must confront the problem of religious value by moving through the triad of value claim, apparent value testing, and then empirical value. Our stored ideals critique religious values as we build this posited base of empirical values. There is a moment of negation. We evaluate values through the philosophical dialectic of reason. We negate extreme subjectivism. We negate objective irrationalism. All values participate in a holistic system of value. We also enlist the surfaces of history and sociology and psychology. Now, block 3, values are instrumental, they are lower intrinsic, or they are higher intrinsic. They combine into a whole coalescence of value. Religion functions here as the agency that applies the axiom of conservation. Religion works toward the conservation of values. The self is awakened to a need for interdependence and dialogue concerning the building of this coalescence of value. That takes us to 4, the Da Kunta threshold, Aristotle's Da Kunta threshold. Religious values require dialogue for refinement because they address moral right, beauty, destiny, and divine will. We want to raise up the positive apparent values into becoming true values, because our true value can become a sign ideal norm. Then it will transition into the practical. But we have to lift the positive apparent suppositions of value into becoming true values through dialogue within the body of Christ with regard to Christianity as living religion. So now we move on to block 5. We take a look at that notion of the true. Out of communal dialogue emerges a 5-step process of raising up supposed value claims to becoming notions of true value. Number 1, intentionality. We have an intentionality of constructing a holistic value system. 2, we move through analysis from the value claim. The eidos ideal is extracted out of the value claim through dialogue with others. Then we posit a hypothesis as to how this notion of the true is situated in the value model, the coalescence of values. And we have a posited notion of true value that emerges, and then it must move on to reinterpretation, verification, and reinterpretation, that the abstract model must become concrete through phronesis and praxis. Dialogue allows us to raise up the eidos ideal out of the supposed apparent value claim. But we've got to move on to becoming actively moving out of the abstract into the concrete. So in block 6, the quest for value certainty requires the self to work the holistic value model through the process of experimental positing and interpretive construction. Experimental positing and interpretive construction. It involves evaluating the objective value possibilities that already exist in experience that ask for our participation. The self seeks to realize coherence, where true values are integrated into a consistent system of value, and then actualizing that system of value through praxis. The value system must be made concrete, says Brightman. It must become real. So, block 7, if coherence and certainty are to be achieved, then the self must participate in the philosophical dialectic of reason in order to raise true values to the level of concept, with an existence and a power of their own. The concept of God becomes the most fundamental philosophical problem to be confronted for living religion. So when we do reach concept, we reach the concept of God, says Brightman. Coalescence of value reaches the concept of God. The concept of God becomes the most fundamental philosophical problem to be confronted for living religion. God becomes equated with the permanence of value, which the self is seeking to actualize. God is posited as monotheism, knowable, and highest coalescence of value. But we have to move on to block 8 because we want to transition from the what is to the what ought to be. God is posited as movement toward perfection. As a movement, this becomes evolutionary theism for Brightman. It becomes evolutionary theism. That is Brightman's position, a position of God being equated with evolutionary theism. We participate in God's immanence in nature and God's immanence in value experience, which is the objective continuance of value that we confront. There is a veiled, sometimes veiled, objective continuance of value. Through our participation, we form the ought as our rational interpretation of experience that we want to actualize, and we do this by finding that entrance nodal point into the objective continuance of value that exists. That's going to create a return moment, because anytime you enter into phronesis and praxis, there is a return moment, and that's going to be block 9. In block 9, out of our participation comes the moment of unio mystica, the intuitive grasp of God's possibilities. In return moment, we move beyond concept. Our sign-like judgment becomes revised. Idea and object become one, and our state of mind is deepened in conviction. Our state of mind becomes deepened as it asks for revision. Very critical. It does move into that return moment. It takes us all the way back over there to block 10, the reflexive return, the reflection side of praxis, and that's going to feed that state of mind that feeds block 1. In other words, we go back to a blank phenomenology page again. We're going to erase this because Brightman's going to present a third level of phenomenology. He has presented a phenomenology of religion, which reached living religion. He has presented a phenomenology of value that has reached evolutionary theism. So we had living religion, we had God as evolutionary theism, and we've moved all the way back to block 1, and we're going to begin the third level of phenomenology next with Brightman, and it's going to be looking at apocalyptic, or apocalypsis in Greek, because he does heavily rely on a Greek lexical content. So apocalypsis, the unveiling of revealed truth, apocalyptic. But we have completed 2 phenomenology levels. We have now, in reaching page 172, we have looked at, and Brightman spells this out to us, and remember in page 93 he said, I've completed my phenomenology of religion. Well, there's a whole lot of book to go, and he says he's done on page 93. But he says that because he says, I'm going to begin now a phenomenology of value. Well, on page 172, he has completed that phenomenology. There are 3 levels of phenomenology in his philosophy of religion. So now we have a recap, our second recap. We have a recap of the phenomenology of value. We've completed 2 levels, 2 complete concentrated, focused looks at his phenomenology. We have that composite for the Phenomenology of Religion, which really is a look at arriving at living religion. But somehow we had to arrive at the concept of God. And so we had to erase everything and begin again on page 93 all the way to page 172 to reach that concept of God. And the concept of God is theism. It isn't objective deism. It isn't naturalism immanence. It is theism, which is a transcendence that is not a rigid externality. It's a transcendence that is transcendence within immanence. We would call it incarnation. It's transcendence as immanent, an incarnate transcendence. It's an evolutionary theism that unfolds the movement toward perfection of a coalescence of values. Movement toward a perfection of the coalescence of values. So, a very critical level, we reach the concept of God. But having reached the concept of God, Brightman now has to ask the question, what about the future of God? What about the revelatory area that he said he would investigate? In our very first lesson, he said that he would have to take a look at revelatory content. So then we get into apocalyptic. So we're going to begin again with a whole new series on a phenomenology of apocalyptic. That means we will begin at page 173, and this entire phenomenology can be erased. We've got it now. We've got two levels, and we will have the third book within the book. He actually has 3 books within one here. It's a massive volume, but he tells us right away that he is relying heavily on Hegel. He's relying heavily on the lexical content, the lexical network of terms that Aristotle gives us. So Aristotle and Hegel become critically important for his philosophy of religion. But he gives us a very definitive statement by page 93 that he's concluded his phenomenology of religion. So he's going to start a new one, he says, on page 93. And then we reach that entire process. And now we're going to enter into, actually the next lesson is going to address revelation. What is revelation within this philosophy of religion? What is revelation for Edgar Sheffield Brightman? So I like the idea that he doesn't present one phenomenology and say that's it. There are interrelated phenomenologies that take place within the philosophy of religion. They aren't necessarily sequential. He's giving them to us sequentially, but they're really interrelated at every level. Living religion interrelates with evolutionary theism, and they both are going to interrelate with eschatology or teleosis, depending on what term you want to use there. Probably teleosis is the better term to use. It's going to be more in alignment with Aristotle and with Hegel as far as that goes. So this is going to wrap up our composite focused picture of a phenomenology of value. We're going to begin again with the third level of phenomenology with page 173 next.